The jagged mountains of Afghanistan stood like ancient sentinels against the night sky, their peaks shrouded in a heavy blanket of fog that swallowed even the glow of infrared strobes. The bitter cold gnawed through standard-issue thermal gear as Lieutenant Thomas Walker crouched behind a scarred boulder, scanning the hostile terrain through his night vision goggles. The land was merciless, all sharp rock, sparse vegetation, and long sightlines that granted lethal advantages to anyone holding higher ground. 14 years in Navy SEAL operations had hardened Walker to the worst battlefields on Earth. But this felt different. Final. The four-man team of SEAL Unit Bravo 4 was trapped in a shallow depression, with cover so thin it barely deserved the name. The elevated position surrounding them loomed dark and threatening. Perfect vantage points for the enemies closing in like wolves around wounded prey. Contact front, Petty Officer Sarah Blackwood's voice cut over comms, just as muzzle flashes lit up the ridgeline above. At 29, she was the youngest of the team, but her expertise in communications and battlefield medicine had saved their lives more times than any of them could count. The air exploded with incoming fire, bullets kicking up dirt inches from their position. Michael Harris, the team's designated marksman, returned measured shots while ammunition conservation calculations ran visibly across his face. Next to him, Robert Jackson worked the squad automatic weapon in controlled bursts, his weathered features set in grim determination. What should have been a straightforward extraction had descended into a nightmare when their support helicopter suffered catastrophic engine failure just 3 kilometers from the landing zone. Now, they were stranded in hostile territory, surrounded, with dwindling ammunition and no backup in sight. "Ammo check," Walker ordered, his voice steady, despite the dire circumstances. "2 mags plus half," Harris reported. "1/3 belt remaining," Jackson responded. "Last mag, 6 grenades left," Blackwood added. Walker nodded, the weight of command pressing down heavier than his tactical gear. The math was brutal and simple, not enough firepower to fight their way out. He keyed his radio, switching to the emergency frequency. Any station, this is Bravo 4 Alpha. Request immediate assistance. Grid 34.7251 north, 69.4384 east. Taking heavy fire. Need extraction or fire support now." The radio hissed with static. Nothing. He switched frequencies. "Broken arrow! Broken arrow! Bravo 4 Alpha compromised. Repeat, compromised." The silence that followed was more terrifying than the gunfire. "Sir," Harris shifted closer, his voice low. "Maybe we should think about finishing the mission." Walker cut him off, though the unspoken alternative nodded at him from the darkness. Had they already reached that point? The moment when good men considered surrender or worse? The fog pressed in thicker, heavy with the metallic tang of gunpowder and fear. Somewhere beyond their perimeter, enemy fighters aligned for what would surely be their final push. Walker shut his eyes briefly, murmuring the Lord's Prayer he'd learned as a boy in rural Montana. When he opened them again, the night felt heavier, as if it had swallowed every trace of hope. Then it came, a voice slicing through the static like a razor through silk. "Bravo 4 Alpha. This is Go Sentinel. I have your position. Hold fast." The 4 SEALs froze, weapons still aimed outward, but for the first time in hours, a thin current of hope sparked between them. The voice was female, low and steady, utterly calm in the chaos. "Did you hear that?" Blackwood whispered, her finger hovering near her earpiece as if to adjust it. Harris's eyes narrowed. "Go Sentinel, like the stories?" "What stories?" Walker demanded, though he'd heard the whispers too. Tales that circulated among special operations teams about guardian angels who appeared when all hope was lost. Operators who officially didn't exist. "Ghost Division," Harris said quietly. "Heard about them at Bragg." special operators who vanished from all records, working outside the chain of command. Most thought it was just barracks folklore. Bravo 4 Alpha, the voice returned, clinical and precise. Hostiles at bearing 0-5, range 400 meters, elevated position behind the split boulder. Secondary group at bearing 315 using the dead tree for cover. Walker's senses sharpened instantly. Whoever she was spotting details they couldn't even pick up with their night vision. "Copy, Ghost Sentinel," he answered cautiously. "What's your position?" "Northeast ridge, approximately 1,800 meters from your location. I've got thermal imaging and clean sightlines to your perimeter." 1,800 meters. In this weather, impossible. Blackwood keyed her mic, skepticism evident in her tone. "Go, Sentinel. How do we know you're friendly?" The pause that followed was brief but loaded. "Because if I weren't, you'd already be dead." The bluntness was oddly reassuring. "Bravo 4 Alpha. You're going to move in stages. Blackwood, bound northeast 20 meters to the cluster of rocks shaped like a horseshoe. Walker, you'll provide covering fire, on my mark." Walker hesitated. Taking orders from an unidentified operator broke every protocol in the book, but protocol hadn't kept them alive so far. "Sir," Harris whispered, his scope fixed on the terrain. "Every position she called out, I can see the muzzle flashes now. She's dead on." The radio crackled again. "Movement on the western slope. They're closing to flank you. 4 minutes until crossfire." 4 minutes. Decision made. "Go, Sentinel. We're on your call." "Stand by." 30 agonizing seconds passed. Walker could hear his own heartbeat, the shallow breathing of his men, and the faint crunch of boots on rock as enemy fighters moved unseen through the darkness. Then came the sharp crack of a rifle shot, reverberating across the valley, followed by shouting from the western slope. One flanking position went silent. "Blackwood, move now," came the order. And so began their desperate dance with death, choreographed by their unseen protector. 1,800 meters away, Eleanor Mason adjusted her position on the cold rock, her cheek welded to the stock of her custom M2010 enhanced sniper rifle. At 38, she'd spent more of her adult life looking through a scope than not. The modified weapon felt less like a tool and more like an extension of her body, its unofficial modifications known to no manual. Through her advanced thermal optics, she watched the SEAL team execute their first bound exactly as instructed. Good discipline. Professional. They'd need every bit of that professionalism to survive the night. But what troubled her more than the immediate firefight was what she was seeing through her thermal imaging. These weren't standard Taliban fighters. Their movements were too coordinated, their tactics too refined. And their equipment. That wasn't local hardware. She adjusted her scope, focusing on one figure directing others from a protected position. The distinctive shape of an American-made tactical radio in his hand confirmed her suspicions. Shadow operations. Private military contractors gone rogue, led by a man she knew all too well. Richard Deacon, former Navy SEAL, discharged for conduct unbecoming. Now he ran the most dangerous mercenary outfit in the region, selling skills taught by the U.S. government to the highest bidder. Eleanor's mind flashed back to a conversation 5 years ago. General James Sullivan, her mentor and former commanding officer, gray-haired even then at 65, leaning across his desk with concern etched into the lines of his face. "Mason, watch yourself around Deacon. The man's a shark who smells blood in the water, and he's got friends in places you wouldn't believe." She'd learned the truth of those words the hard way in Operation Nightshade. 3 good operators, friends, had died that night because Deacon prioritized profit over brothers in arms. Eleanor pushed the memory away. Focus on the now. These SEALs needed her, and wallowing in old grudges wouldn't keep them alive. She tracked another hostile fighter attempting to outflank the team's new position, calculated wind speed, barometric pressure, humidity, temperature, and the Coriolis effect in seconds, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle whispered death across the valley. Through her scope, she saw Lieutenant Walker's head turn slightly toward the sound of her shot, a question visible even in his posture. Who was she? Why was she helping them? Walker, she said into her comm, I know you have questions. Save them. You've got movement to your east, 3 fighters with RPGs. When I give the word, you and Harris head for the fallen log 15 meters south of Blackwood's position. She adjusted her position slightly and prepared for the next phase of extraction. Overhead, the clouds shifted, briefly revealing a cold sliver of moon. Just enough light to cast shadows, and in shadows, ghosts thrived. Get ready, she whispered. The real fight is just beginning. The night erupted into a deadly symphony conducted by their invisible guardian. Each crack of Eleanor's rifle came from a different direction, creating the illusion of multiple snipers covering the SEAL team's movement. Her precision was surgical. Each target selected not just for the immediate threat they posed, but for the tactical advantage their elimination created in the overall battlefield geometry. Walker had never witnessed anything like it. In 14 years of special operations, he'd worked alongside the best marksmen alive, but this was something else entirely. This was artistry written in blood and brass. Final bound, Ghost Sentinel directed after their third movement. All units to the stone wall 200 meters northeast. Eyes on you the whole way. Copy, Ghost Sentinel, Walker replied, then paused. And thank you. Save the gratitude until you're home safe, came the quick, firm response. They moved in practiced pairs, bounding forward while providing cover for each other. Each time enemy fire threatened to pin them down, a precise shot from their guardian ghost would eliminate the threat, always from a different firing position, making it impossible for the enemy to locate her. By the time they reached the stone wall, an ancient shepherd's boundary that provided their first genuine cover of the night, the opposing fire had diminished significantly. Blackwood slid in beside Walker, breathing hard but steady. Sir, she said, her voice low with something like awe. Whoever she is, she's operating on another level entirely. Walker nodded, about to respond when Blackwood suddenly stiffened, pressing her radio headset tighter against her ear. I'm picking up enemy comms, she whispered urgently, encrypted, but using an outdated cipher we cracked last year. Her fingers worked quickly over her compact decryption device. Sir, they're not just targeting us. They're talking about someone called Ghost Hunter. They're hunting her. Harris exchanged a meaningful look with Walker. Sir, what if this isn't about us at all? What if we're the bait? Before Walker could process this, Jackson shifted subtly beside them, his hand moving toward a pocket rather than his weapon. Walker had served with Robert Jackson for 3 years, had trusted him with his life countless times. Yet something in that small movement triggered every warning instinct honed by years in the field. Jackson, Walker said evenly, his own hand never leaving his rifle. What's in the pocket? The moment stretched, taut as a tripwire. Insurance, Jackson finally answered, his voice different somehow, as if a mask had slipped. Nothing personal, Lieutenant. Just business. In the split second before chaos erupted, Walker registered the small tracking device in Jackson's palm, and the resigned look of a man who'd made his choices long ago. Harris reacted first, weapon swinging toward Jackson, but the betrayer was faster, hurling something small and cylindrical toward them. Not a grenade, a signal beacon. He's marked our position, Blackwood shouted as Walker tackled Jackson to the ground. Shadow Ops paid better than the Navy, Jackson spat through bloodied teeth after Walker landed the first punch. And they're going to own this valley by morning. Why? Walker demanded, restraining the traitor with practiced efficiency. Jackson laughed, a hollow sound. It was never about you. You're just the cheese in the trap. They want her. Ghost Hunter. Been hunting her for years. Who is she? Walker pressed, aware that their position was likely compromised. Ask her yourself, Jackson said with a grim smile. If any of us live that long. On her ridge, Eleanor's blood ran cold as a familiar voice crackled through her secure channel, one that shouldn't have had access to her frequency. I know that's you out there, ghost hunter. Richard Deacon. His voice hadn't changed in 5 years, still that same smooth, educated tone that masked the predator beneath. Been a while, he continued when she didn't respond. 5 years, to be exact, since Operation Nightshade, since you fled rather than finish the job. Eleanor adjusted her position, scanning for his location, keeping her breathing steady despite the rage building inside her. This was no coincidence. Shadow Ops hadn't stumbled upon a SEAL team by accident. Her secure phone vibrated, a message from Sullivan on their emergency channel. Mason. Trap. Shadow Ops knew you'd come. Get out now. The pieces clicked together with terrible clarity. Deacon had engineered this entire scenario, placing a vulnerable SEAL team in harm's way, knowing that Ghost Division, knowing she, would respond. It was an elaborate trap set with human bait. But why? What did Deacon want badly enough to orchestrate this deadly charade? The answer came in his next transmission. You're good, Eleanor. Always were. But you can't save everyone, especially when you don't know who to trust. A pause. Did Sullivan ever tell you the real reason behind Nightshade? About what we were really sent to retrieve? About the evidence? Before she could process this, new movement caught her eye. The enemy forces were regrouping, adopting a three-pronged attack formation that would overwhelm the stone wall position within minutes. And they were deploying heavy weapons. She counted 3 RPG teams and what looked like a vehicle-mounted machine gun being positioned. Eleanor faced an impossible choice: pursue Deacon, and the answer she'd sought for 5 years, or stay and protect 4 SEALs, one of whom was already compromised. Her comms crackled again. This time it was Sullivan himself. Mason, sitrep. 4 SEALs at the stone wall, 1 compromised. Shadow Ops deploying heavy weapons. Deacon is on site. A long pause. Deacon's presence changes things. New priority. Eliminate Deacon. That's a direct order. Something in Sullivan's tone set off warning bells. In 5 years working with him, he'd never prioritized a single target over protecting operators in the field. Sir, with respect, the SEALs won't survive without support. Sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good, Mason. Deacon has information that could compromise national security. The SEAL team is regrettable collateral. Eleanor's finger hovered over her transmit button as terrible understanding dawned. Sullivan's words echoed Deacon's almost exactly. The real reason behind Nightshade. Were they both part of something bigger? Had she been a pawn all along? She made her decision. Copy that, she responded to Sullivan, then immediately switched to the SEAL team's frequency. Bravo 4, be advised. You have approximately 30 hostiles converging from 3 directions with heavy weapons. This is about to get intense. Walker's voice came back steady but tight. Copy, Ghost Sentinel. Can you maintain support? Eleanor took a deep breath, knowing what her next words would cost her. Affirmative. But be advised, this isn't a random encounter. You were deliberately placed here as bait in an operation targeting me. Your extract was sabotaged, and based on comm intercepts, Sullivan himself may be compromised. Silence then. Understood. How do you want to play this? No questions about her identity. No demands for proof. Just professional acceptance of the battlefield reality and preparation for the next move. Eleanor felt a surge of respect for the lieutenant. 2 options, she replied. defensive hold until dawn when air support becomes viable, or aggressive counterattack to seize their command vehicle for extract. The men are asking which option keeps you alive too, Ghost Sentinel. Eleanor almost smiled at that. Tell them I'm touched by their concern, but ghosts don't die easily. She shifted position again, finding a new vantage point as the enemy forces began their advance. Her scope found Deacon, directing the attack from what he thought was a secure position. Besides, she added, I've got a score to settle. The next 30 minutes unfolded in a ballet of precision violence. Eleanor worked methodically, prioritizing targets with cold efficiency. First the RPG teams, then the heavy machine gun operators, followed by their communications specialist. Each elimination created a cascading failure in the enemy's attack coordination. From her vantage point, she watched Walker reorganize his team into an effective three-man defensive unit. Even compromised, they fought with disciplined precision, making every round count. Their movement spoke of countless hours of training and shared combat experience. The telepathic coordination that only comes from facing death together repeatedly. But the mathematics of combat remained merciless. No matter how precise her shooting or how disciplined their defense, 30 attackers against 4 defenders, one now restrained, with limited ammunition could only end one way. Eleanor made a decision that broke every rule of sniper operations. She would move closer, sacrifice the safety of distance for more direct intervention. It meant exposing herself, becoming vulnerable. But sometimes, survival required impossible choices. She slung her rifle, drew her secondary weapons, a suppressed MK-23 SOCOM pistol and her combat knife, and began moving silently down the ridge toward the battlefield. The fog provided cover, but also blindness. She relied on her knowledge of the terrain and the sound of gunfire to navigate. 15 minutes later, she was close enough to hear Walker shouting orders over the din of combat. The SEAL team had consolidated their position, but enemy fighters had worked their way around to approach from behind. 2 mercenaries moved silently toward the wall, unaware of Eleanor's presence in the shadows. They never heard her approach. One moment they were advancing on their prey, the next they were silent figures slumping into the fog. But the third man, the one she hadn't seen, got off a single shot before her knife found his throat. The bullet tore through her shoulder, spinning her around with shocking force. Eleanor bit down on a scream, pressing herself against the cold stone, feeling warm blood soaking through her tactical gear. "Contact rear," Walker shouted, having heard the suppressed shot and the brief struggle. Eleanor forced herself to move, staggering toward the wall. "Friendly coming in," she gasped into her radio. "Don't shoot!" She rounded the corner of the stone wall, one hand pressed to her bleeding shoulder, the other holding her pistol. For the first time, Eleanor Mason faced the men she'd been protecting all night. Walker's expression shifted from combat alertness to shock as he took in her appearance. A woman in her late 30s, lean, and weathered by years of hard service, now pale from blood loss and pain. "Your ghost sentinel?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. "In the flesh," she managed, with a grimace that might have been a smile. Though there's a bit less of that than there was an hour ago. Blackwood was beside her instantly, medical kit already open. "Let me see that wound." As the medic worked, Harris kept his weapon trained outward, professional to the core, despite the remarkable circumstances. "Ma'am, there's still at least 15 hostiles out there, including their leader." Eleanor nodded. "Richard Deacon, former SEAL. Now he runs shadow operations, private military contractors with no ethical boundaries." "You know him," Walker observed. "Not a question." "Operation Nightshade, 5 years ago. 3 of my team died because Deacon chose profit over people. He was supposed to be coordinating our extraction. Instead, he sold our position to extract a high-value asset on his own. Blackwood finished bandaging the wound with field-expedient efficiency. That should hold for now, but you need proper medical attention. First, we need to survive until morning, Eleanor replied, checking her weapons. Deacon knows I'm here now. He'll throw everything he has at us. Walker's radio crackled to life with a new voice. Smooth, educated, with undertones of cruel amusement. Lieutenant Walker, this is Richard Deacon. I believe you're harboring a fugitive. Eleanor Mason is wanted for desertion and treason against the United States. I'm authorized to take her into custody by any means necessary. Walker glanced at Eleanor, who shook her head slightly. This is Lieutenant Walker, he responded. I don't take orders from private contractors. If you have legitimate authority, you can present it to my commanding officer at base. Deacon's laugh was cold. Lieutenant, you have no idea what game you're in. Mason has evidence that would destroy people at the highest levels of our government. That's why she disappeared 5 years ago. That's why she's been hiding as a ghost. Walker muted his radio and turned to Eleanor. Is that true? She met his gaze directly. Partly. I have evidence that Deacon and certain officials, including General Sullivan, were running unauthorized operations, selling weapons to terrorist groups, using military resources for private gain, eliminating witnesses. If you have evidence, why not come forward? Because the people involved are untouchable without absolute proof. I've spent 5 years gathering that proof, building a network to protect operators in the field from being sacrificed like my team was. She grimaced as pain shot through her shoulder. The evidence is secured. If I don't check in every 72 hours, it goes to multiple news outlets and foreign intelligence agencies simultaneously. Walker studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. The simple acknowledgement one professional gives another when they've made their assessment. We hold until dawn, he decided, then turned to his team. Harris, conserve ammunition, priority targets only. Blackwood, prepare our friend Jackson for rapid movement. We're taking him with us. As they reorganized their defense, Eleanor's secure phone vibrated with an incoming message. Sullivan again. Mason. Drones, show your position compromised. Extract impossible. Take the shot at Deacon. Authorization, Sierra Alpha. She stared at the message, weighing Sullivan's words against his possible motivations. If he was part of Deacon's operation, was this a ploy to expose her position? Or was he genuinely trying to complete the mission? The decision crystallized with sudden clarity. She'd protected these SEALs not because of orders or duty, but because it was right. 5 years ago, she'd walked away from a system that treated operators as expendable tools rather than risk her soul by becoming part of that system. Lieutenant, she said quietly, at dawn, a Black Hawk will appear, supposedly for extraction. It will be Deacon's people. The authentication codes they'll use will sound legitimate, but will be slightly wrong. Walker's eyes narrowed. How can you be sure? Because that's how they took my team 5 years ago. She handed him a small device from her pocket. This is a secure transmitter keyed to a private frequency. When the helicopter appears, press this button. One of mine will respond. One of yours? Eleanor allowed herself a small smile. Ghost Division isn't just me, Lieutenant. There are others who've seen the truth and chosen to operate in the shadows to protect those still in the system. As the eastern sky began to lighten imperceptibly, Deacon's voice came over the radio again. Final offer, Walker. Surrender Mason and your team walks away. Refuse, and none of you see another sunset. Walker looked at Eleanor, who had moved to a firing position with her pistol, favoring her wounded shoulder. What do you think, Ghost Sentinel? Should I take the deal? He's lying, she replied simply. But dawn's coming, and ghosts do their best work in the first light. The attack, when it came, was precisely coordinated and executed with professional skill. Covering fire from multiple positions, smoke grenades to obscure vision, and tactical movement to flank the stone wall. In another scenario, Against regular opponents, it would have been textbook perfect. But they weren't facing regular opponents. Eleanor and the SEAL team had prepared a nasty surprise. Using Jackson's gear and Blackwood's communications expertise, they'd created false heat signatures at the wall, then retreated to secondary positions 20 meters back. When Deacon's mercenaries breached the wall, they found only empty space where their thermal imaging had shown human targets. The momentary confusion cost them dearly, as Walker and Harris opened fire from concealed positions, while Eleanor, despite her injury, eliminated the enemy commander with a single pistol shot at 70 meters. Without leadership, the assault faltered. Mercenaries fought for money, not conviction, and their appetite for casualties had limits. After losing nearly half their force with nothing to show for it, the remaining Shadow Ops fighters began a strategic withdrawal. Just as the first genuine rays of dawn broke over the eastern ridge, the distinctive thump-thump of helicopter rotors echoed across the valley. "Extract incoming," Walker announced, though his tone remained cautious. Eleanor nodded toward the small transmitter she'd given him. "Wait for their authentication. If it's wrong, send our signal." The Black Hawk appeared over the ridge, impressive and welcome in the golden light of morning. Its pilot's voice crackled over their frequency. "Bravo 4, this is Nighthawk 17, authorization Sierra Tango 9er 4. Prepare for immediate extract." Walker looked at Eleanor, who shook her head slightly. The code was close, but wrong. Without hesitation, Walker pressed the transmitter button. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. The Black Hawk continued its approach, its door gunner clearly visible now. Then, from the north, two unmarked Little Bird helicopters appeared, moving at attack speed, weapons trained on the larger aircraft. A new voice broke over all frequencies. "Black Hawk, this is Ghost Actual. You are entering restricted airspace with false credentials. Divert course immediately or you will be engaged." The Black Hawk hesitated, hovering, then slowly turned away. The Little Birds escorted it beyond the ridge before one peeled off and descended toward their position. "Your ride, Lieutenant," Eleanor said with the first genuine smile since they'd met. As the helicopter touched down, Walker supervised the loading of their gear and the secured prisoner. Eleanor stood slightly apart, watching the horizon where Deacon's forces had disappeared. "Mason," Walker said, approaching her. "Come with us." She shook her head. "I can't go back into the system. Not yet." "Then what was this all for?" "Justice takes time, Lieutenant. Deacon escaped today, but his operation is compromised. More importantly, I have confirmation now that Sullivan is involved. That's another piece of the puzzle." Walker studied her face, understanding dawning. "You never planned to kill Deacon. You wanted to force him into the open, to confirm the connection. Sometimes the mission isn't what you think it is." She handed him a small object, a silver and black patch showing a winged serpent. "If you ever need us, this frequency is embedded in the thread. Just transmit the word Sentinel." As they prepared to board, Blackwood stepped forward. "Will we see you again?" Eleanor's expression softened. "Ghosts don't usually attend parties, Petty Officer Blackwood, but they're always watching over their own." The Little Bird lifted off, carrying the SEAL team back to safety. Eleanor Mason watched until they disappeared over the horizon, then melted back into the morning shadows. There was more work to be done, more operators who needed protection in a system that sometimes forgot the human cost of war. 6 months later, Lieutenant Walker received a securely delivered package at Fort Bragg. Inside was a dossier containing evidence of corruption reaching the highest levels of military command, including General Sullivan and 3 defense contractors. The accompanying note read simply, "Justice arrives at dawn. E.M." That same day, news broke of multiple high-level arrests at the Pentagon. Richard Deacon was found in his Virginia estate, prepared to testify against his former associates in exchange for leniency. When asked later how he felt about the revelation of corruption among those he'd served, Walker would only say, "I learned something important in Afghanistan. The true guardians of our nation's honor aren't always the ones in the spotlight. Sometimes they're ghosts, watching over us from the shadows, holding the line between right and wrong when systems fail." He never spoke publicly about the silver and black patch he kept in his pocket, or about the growing network of operators who recognized that symbol and what it meant, that even in the darkest night, guardians were watching, that some angels wore combat boots and carried rifles, that some ghosts were very much alive and dedicated to protecting those who served. Because some legends aren't just stories told in barracks. Some are flesh and blood, sacrifice and honor, moving silently through the shadows of war to ensure that good men and women make it home. Even when the system fails them, the ghosts never will.